Welcome to this explainer. Let's dive right in. Because today we're unpacking one of the most fascinating and fiercely debated copyright controversies in recent pop music history. So, Miley Cyrus's massive smash hit Flowers completely took the world by storm. It broke streaming records left and right and even snagged a Grammy. But almost immediately, listeners started noticing a pretty striking resemblance to another massive hit from a decade prior, Bruno Mars's 2012 piano ballad, When I Was Your Man. These are two absolute titans of the pop world, and honestly, when two songs of this magnitude collide, the entire music industry pays attention. And you know, the connection between these two tracks wasn't just internet chatter, it actually escalated into a formal lawsuit. Tempo Music Investments claims there is undeniable intentional copying here. But instead of getting caught up in all the social media drama, today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to forensically examine the actual sheet music, the tempo, the rhythmic complexity, and the chord progressions. Our goal? To neutrally evaluate these viral allegations by looking at the actual math underneath the music to see what's really going on under the hood.
Here is how we're going to break this down today. 1. The copyright lawsuit. 2. Comparing the lyrics. 3. Tempo and rhythmic complexity. 4. Analyzing the chord progressions. And 5. The response song.
Alright, let's kick things off with section 1, the copyright lawsuit and the core accusations.
So this lawsuit we're discussing was filed by Tempo Music Investments. They're a company that actually owns a share of the copyright for When I Was Your Man. Their legal filing argues that Flowers simply would not exist without Bruno Mars's track, claiming intentional copying of the melody, the harmony, and the lyrics. But what's really interesting here is that Bruno Mars himself is notably not a plaintiff in this dispute at all. He hasn't publicly commented on it. Furthermore, the songwriters of Flowers have never credited Mars or his co-writers, maintaining that their song is a totally independent creation. It really sets up a fascinating legal and musical showdown.
Moving right along to section 2, comparing the lyrics and looking at the surface similarities. The lyrical connection here is absolutely undeniable. As you can see, Miley's track directly flips Bruno's regretful lyrics into these empowering statements of self-reliance. Where Bruno sings, "I should have bought you flowers and held your hand," Miley fires back with, "I can buy myself flowers, and I can hold my own hand." It's a brilliant, direct thematic inversion, and this lyrical conversation is exactly why listeners instantly connect to the two songs. But it also completely shifts the tone. Bruno's original lyrics are steeped in this agonizing regret, constantly looking backward at what he failed to do. Miley's lyrics take those exact failures and transform them into a modern anthem. She isn't looking backward, she's looking inward and forward. This incredibly clever thematic mirror is the foundational reason these songs are so linked in the public consciousness.
Which brings us to section 3, tempo and rhythmic complexity. This is where we find the foundational differences. So tempo is basically the pulse of a track. It dictates the entire feel and emotional resonance. When I Was Your Man operates as a stripped-down, highly emotional piano ballad. It moves at a very slow, reflective, and deliberate 73 beats per minute. And this dragging tempo is entirely by design. At 73 BPM, the song essentially forces you to sit with the melancholy of the lyrics. There's no rush, nowhere to hide from the heartbreak, leaving massive amounts of open space between the piano strikes for Bruno's vocal to just echo and ache.
In stark contrast, Flowers drives forward at a very upbeat, disco-light 118 beats per minute. Guys, that is a massive structural difference. At 118 BPM, Flowers features a funky, driving bass line and a classic 4-on-the-floor drum beat. The physical energy of the two tracks exists in completely different musical universes. Why does this matter? Well, because a 118 BPM track physically forces you to move. It changes your heart rate. It transforms the underlying theme from a sad reflection into a triumphant anthem of survival. While the lyrics are having a conversation, the physical groove of Flowers is designed for a dance floor, not a dimly lit piano lounge. Beyond just the speed, analyzing the vocal rhythm reveals two entirely different approaches. Bruno's melody is vastly complex. His phrasing plays with the rhythm dynamically, pulling back, pushing forward against the tempo, and he makes sweeping, acrobatic use of his vocal range. Miley's melody, conversely, is intentionally simple and grounded. Her verses rely almost entirely on steady, predictable quarter note beats in standard 4/4 common time. She sits squarely on the beat. She isn't trying to deliver a soaring, chaotic vocal performance. Instead, she's creating a hypnotic, steady, confident groove. Her rhythmic simplicity projects a profound sense of self-assuredness that acts as a complete foil to Bruno's emotionally chaotic phrasing.
Okay, let's dive into section 4, analyzing the chord progressions. These are the real musical building blocks.
Now, you might
might have seen this online, and it is absolutely true. Both songs are played in the key of C, and both happen to open with an A minor chord. However, as any music theorist will quickly tell you, literally tens of thousands of pop songs share these exact same basic traits. Starting a sad or reflective pop song with an A minor chord in the key of C is one of the most common building blocks in Western music. It's basically the musical equivalent of starting a story with "Once Upon a Time." It sets a recognizable mood, sure, but it doesn't automatically mean the rest of the story is going to be the same.
The real truth comes out when we look at what happens right after that first chord. When we chart out the verse progressions side by side, you can see the chord structures quickly diverge. Bruno moves from A minor to C, to D minor, G, G7, C, and G over B. Miley moves from A minor 7 to C, to G, to C major 7. Aside from that initial starting point, the harmonic journey of the verses is completely distinct. Bruno's progression introduces incredible emotional tension by dipping into that D minor and relying heavily on the dominant G7 to pull the listener back. It constantly feels like it's searching for resolution. Miley's progression, on the other hand, stays relatively bright and secure. Resolving on that warm C major 7 creates a feeling of contentment. The emotional math of these two sequences is just telling two entirely different stories.
And moving into the pre-choruses and choruses, these are two completely different musical progressions that simply do not match up on sheet music. Bruno's chorus is a dense, winding path that even touches on an F minor to drive home that heart-wrenching pain. Miley's loop's a confident, cyclical progression that keeps the energy moving forward. Now, people online love to point out that there are mashups where the two songs blend nicely together. But let's be real, with modern software adjusting pitch and tempo, you can blend almost any two pop songs that share the same key. A clever TikTok mashup absolutely does not equal identical sheet music. Strip away the studio production, look at the raw chords on a page, and they are fundamentally different compositions.
Finally, Section 5, the response song, and how we actually categorize flowers. This brings us to a really crucial concept to take away from this explainer. Flowers functions perfectly as what the industry calls a response song. This is a rich, established tradition in pop, R&B, and hip-hop, where artists converse lyrically rather than plagiarize musically. It's a way to acknowledge, flip, or answer a previous piece of art without copying the underlying musical blueprint. Think of it like a musical sequel told from a completely different perspective. It absolutely relies on the audience knowing the original song to get the full impact, but it still stands entirely on its own 2 feet musically. So, let's synthesize everything we found. The thematic lyrical nods? Undeniable. Miley is clearly having a conversation with Bruno's song. But musically, the tempo, the rhythm, the complex vocal phrasing, and the underlying chord progressions all act as fully independent musical entities. There is no direct sampling and there's no direct interpolation of the sheet music. They share a mood and a lyrical theme, for sure, but the mathematical makeup of the music itself is entirely distinct. Which leads us with this really provocative final question to consider. If a song borrows a vibe and directly answers a lyric, but uses entirely different musical math to get there, where does inspiration end and copyright infringement begin? As pop music continues to constantly reference its own history, this is a boundary the courts, the artists, and we as listeners are going to have to keep defining. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, I highly encourage you to go listen to both tracks back to back right now and hear that underlying math for yourself.